The coastal gale howled, throwing itself against the cliffs like a living beast. Salt spray rattled the windows of the ancient lighthouse keeper's cottage, a lone bastion against the fury of the Atlantic. Inside, former Marine Jonas Keene believed the storm was his greatest enemy that night. He was profoundly mistaken. His husky Luna was not cowering from the thunder. She was clawing frantically at the rotted cellar door, set into the floorboards, her desperate howl a chilling harmony with the wind. She wasn't trying to hide from the storm. She was trying to escape what lay beneath the house. Meanwhile, his German shepherd Atlas stood like a stone sentinel. His powerful body was coiled tight as a spring, a low, guttural growl vibrating from deep within his chest. His amber eyes were not watching the door, but were locked on a single loose stone in the massive fireplace hearth. Two faithful companions. Two distinct alarms. One pointing down, the other pointing in. They were warning him about the same terrible truth. A secret drowned for 15 years. A secret that someone was willing to drag the world to the bottom of the ocean to keep hidden. Today we join Jonas Keene and his loyal pack as they uncover a mystery buried by tide and time, a truth hidden deep within the very foundations of the place he had just begun to call home. If you're ready for this journey, support us by hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel so you don't miss what they find next. Our story begins not in the heart of the storm, but weeks earlier, in the quiet, sterile room of a government auction where a single piece of land deemed cursed by locals was sold for a price too good to be true. But to understand the primal terror of that night, to grasp why the howls of my own dogs felt more threatening than the scream of a hurricane, you have to go back a few weeks. You have to go back to a quiet, sterile room that smelled of old paper and stale coffee, where the fate of a cursed piece of land was decided by the sharp crack of a wooden gavel. After my time in the Corps, the world felt too loud. The cities were a cacophony of meaningless noise. The suburbs, a quiet hum of anxieties that weren't my own. I wasn't looking for comfort. I was looking for silence. The kind of profound, elemental quiet that settles deep in your bones and forces you to confront the ghosts you've been outrunning. I found the promise of that silence in a government auction catalog listed under seized and forfeited properties. It was a ghost on the county ledger, Parcel 3B, the old Rostova place. One lighthouse keeper's cottage, 5 acres of cliffside land, subject to significant coastal erosion and no municipal services. It was a fortress of solitude, an exile's paradise. I had my service dogs with me, Atlas and Luna, lying quietly at my feet. Atlas, my German shepherd, was a statue of stoic calm, his head resting on his paws, but his ears tracking every sound. Luna, my husky, was a coiled spring of energy, her mismatched blue and brown eyes taking in every face in the room. They were my anchors, the only partners I trusted without reservation. When the auctioneer, a man with a voice as drab as his suit, finally announced Parcel 3B, a change swept through the room. It wasn't loud. It was the opposite. It was a sudden, heavy vacuum of sound. The shuffling of feet stopped. The low hum of whispered conversations ceased. A farmer in the front row, who had been bidding aggressively on a tractor, suddenly seemed intensely interested in the scuffs on his boots. "We'll open the bidding for the old Rostova place at $500, the auctioneer said, his tone suggesting he'd be lucky to get it. I raised my hand. 500. My voice cut through a silence as deep and cold as the waters the property overlooked. The auctioneer's eyes found me a flicker of something pity, perhaps in their tired gaze. I have 500. Do I hear 6? Nothing. Not a single hand moved. Not a single person even looked toward the front. Instead, I felt their eyes on me. They weren't looks of envy or of a competitor sizing me up. They were the looks you give a man walking willingly toward a crumbling ledge, a deep, unsettling sympathy. Atlas lifted his head, a low rumble in his chest, so quiet only I could feel it through the floorboards. He sensed it too, the shift in the human atmosphere, the collective holding of breath. Going once, the auctioneer rushed, eager to be done with it. Going twice, he didn't even wait. The gavel came down with a crack that sounded less like a sale and more like the closing of a tomb. Sold to the gentleman in the back. As I walked forward to sign the papers, the dam of silence broke. Whispers followed me, clinging to my back like sea mist. Poor fool. Doesn't know what he's bought. The sea always takes its due from that cliff. The clerk who took my cash wouldn't meet my eyes. She pushed the deed across the counter as if it were contaminated. The entire experience should have been a red flag the size of a ship's sail. But I was a man conditioned to ignore whispers and trust solid ground. I figured it was just local superstition, the kind that grows like moss on isolated coastal towns. I had the deed. I had my dogs. I had my silence. I thought that was all that mattered. The nearby town, a salt-sprayed huddle of buildings called Port Blossom, was where I went for supplies. I pushed open the door to a marine supply shop, a brass bell announcing my arrival. The place smelled of rope, tar, and the ocean. An old man with a face like a weathered sea chart and kind knowing eyes stood behind the counter. Just passing through, or are you foolish enough to stay? He asked, his voice a gravelly warmth. Foolish enough to stay, I admitted, grabbing a list from my pocket. Just bought a place up the coast. He nodded, grabbing a new coil of rope for me. Don't see many new faces. Which place, if you don't mind my asking? The old lighthouse keeper's cottage. The Rostova place. His hands stopped. He carefully set the rope down on the counter, his friendly demeanor evaporating like morning fog. He leaned forward, his voice dropping low. Son, let an old man give you a piece of unsolicited advice. Some places, but they hold onto their stories. That cliff holds onto its more than most. I leaned against the counter, my hand resting on Atlas's broad head. I'm a good listener. That property, he began, his eyes looking past me as if seeing a ghost over my shoulder, belonged to Captain Eva Rostova. She wasn't just some keeper. She was retired Coast Guard, tough as a barnacle, sharp as a marlin spike. Knew these waters better than anyone. About 15 years ago, she vanished. They said a rogue wave took her off the cliff path during a storm, found her boat smashed to pieces, but never found her. The official story is a tragic accident. And the unofficial story, I asked. The old man whose name I learned was Silas polished the already spotless counter. The unofficial story is that Eva didn't fall. She was looking into things that were supposed to stay hidden in the fog. She was asking questions about the shipping lanes, about cargo that wasn't on any manifest. Specifically, she was asking about Marcus Thorne. The name hung in the air. Thorne Shipping is this town, Silas explained. Marcus Thorne owns the docks, the cannery, half the boats in the harbor. He's a pillar of the community, throws money at every local charity. But he came from nothing, built his empire fast. Too fast, some say. Eva thought so. She believed he was using his legitimate business as a cover for something far darker moving up and down this coast. Silas finally looked me in the eye, his gaze intense. Thorne tried to buy that land from her, offered her a fortune. She refused. After she vanished, he tried to get his hands on it through legal channels, but her estate was a tangled mess. The government finally seized it for back taxes. Nobody here would touch it. Not out of fear of ghosts, son. Out of fear of Marcus Thorne. He packaged my supplies in silence for a moment, the weight of his story settling around us. As I paid and turned to leave, he called out one last time. Hey, the Marine right saw the tattoo. I nodded. Just be careful, he said. That woman, Eva, she was a fighter. If she left something behind, it won't be a ghost. It'll be a weapon. And some doors, son, they're locked from the inside for a reason. I had thanked him and left the brass bell marking my exit. Driving out of Port Blossom and up the winding coastal road, his words echoed in my mind. A missing captain, a powerful shipping magnate, a property no one dared to touch. For 15 years, I had come seeking an escape from a war, but it seemed I had just purchased a ticket to a new one. I had dismissed the whispers at the auction, but Silas's story was different. It was a clear, pointed warning. I had bought the land. I had heard the warnings, And now, with the storm screaming outside and my dogs sounding the alarm at two different points in my new home, I was about to find out just what kind of door I had unlocked. The storm was a primal symphony of chaos, and my two dogs were its unwilling soloists. Every crash of thunder, every shriek of wind against the eaves, was an external threat I could understand, a force of nature I could respect and endure. But the terror brewing inside the cottage was something else entirely. It was a cold, sharp-edged fear that had nothing to do with the weather. It was the fear of the unknown, and my dogs were staring right into its heart. Luna, my husky, was possessed by a frantic, desperate energy I had never seen in her. She was a creature of the cold of wild spaces. Storms were in her blood. Yet she was clawing at the cellar door as if the hounds of hell were on the other side. Splinters of ancient wood flew as her paws scrabbled against the thick oak, her high-pitched, mournful howl cutting through the gale. She wasn't trying to get in. Her entire body was angled away, a desperate attempt to warn me to flee, to escape whatever secret the salt-eaten floorboards were keeping. Across the room, Atlas was her perfect, terrifying opposite. There was no panic in him, only a chilling, absolute focus. He stood rigid, a 90-pound statue of coiled muscle, his magnificent German shepherd form a study in silent intensity. His growl wasn't loud. It was a low, vibrating hum that I could feel in the soles of my feet, a sound of deep, instinctual warning. He wasn't looking at the door with Luna. His gaze, a silent, vibrating arrow, was fixed on the hearth. It was a massive fireplace, built from sea-smooth river stones, big enough to stand in. But Atlas wasn't looking at the whole structure. He was staring at one specific stone at its base, a smoother, darker slab of slate that seemed subtly out of place among the rounded granite. Two dogs, two warnings pointing in two different directions. It was a tactical problem, and my training kicked in, pushing past the rising dread. They weren't confused. They weren't sensing two different threats. My gut screamed that they were pointing to 2 points of entry to the same buried truth. And Eva Rostova, the woman Silas, had described a tough, sharp Coast Guard captain would have planned for that. A main entrance and a secret one. Trust your partner. It's the first rule of survival. And I had two of the best. All right, I said, my voice low and calm, a stark contrast to the storm within and without. Show me. I went to Atlas first. His warning felt more precise, more deliberate. I knelt beside him, placing a hand on his back. His muscles were like iron cables. I ran my fingers over the slate stone he was fixated on. It felt cold, solid, set firmly in place. But as I traced its edges, I felt it. The mortar was different. Grittier here, almost sandy, while the rest was a solid, century-old cement. It had been sealed, not built. This was the door. My gear was minimal, but I had what I needed. I retrieved a heavy-duty crowbar from my toolkit, its cold steel, a reassuring weight in my hand. I wedged the flattened end into the seam I'd found and put my weight into it. Nothing. The stone was a tombstone, unmoving. I repositioned, getting better leverage, my muscles straining against the unyielding rock. The muscles in my back and shoulders screamed in protest. Then, with a low groan, the seal began to give. I worked the bar around the edges, chipping away at the old mortar, until, with a final agonizing screech of stone against stone, one side of the slate lifted. A rush of cold, stagnant air hit my face, carrying the smell of damp earth salt and something else, the deep, musty scent of a place that hadn't breathed for a very long time. I dropped the crowbar and, using all my strength, slid the heavy slab aside. Below was not a cellar but the beginning of a narrow, rough-hewn tunnel, just wide enough for a single person. It plunged into darkness. Leaving Atlas to stand guard, I grabbed my high-lumen flashlight and descended. The tunnel was claustrophobic, the stone walls damp and cold against my shoulders. It sloped downward for about 20 feet before opening into a small, stone-lined room. And there, directly in front of me, was the other side of the cellar door. Luna's frantic scratching was now audible, a dull, rhythmic thudding from the other side. This was Eva Rostova's secret. A hidden passage from her fireplace to a sealed exit under her porch. A bolt hole. The door was secured from this side by a thick iron bar set in heavy brackets. But the real obstacle was the lock on the other side, the one Luna had been attacking. It was a massive industrial padlock, its surface a fossil of rust and barnacles. There would be no picking it. I put the head of the crowbar into the thick steel hasp and began to heave using the doorframe as leverage. The old wood groaned in protest. Metal shrieked. With a final explosive effort that sent a shockwave up my arms, the rusted hasp tore away from the wood with a deafening crack. I shoved the heavy door upward. It opened into the screaming wind, revealing Luna, her fur soaked, her eyes wild with a mixture of fear and relief. She licked my face, whining, then immediately backed away from the dark opening. She hadn't been trying to get in. She'd been trying to get me out. With both dogs now beside me, their anxiety finally starting to ebb, I turned my attention to the room I had just unsealed. It was no simple cellar. This was an intelligence post, a secret command center. A simple wooden desk and chair sat against one wall. On the wall above it, nautical charts were pinned, but they were covered in annotations, hand-drawn routes that deviated from official shipping lanes, red-inked circles around specific coves and inlets, dates and times scrawled in the margins. A shortwave radio sat on the desk, its power source long dead. Pinned to a corkboard were photographs, grainy, long-lens shots of men loading unmarked crates onto a sleek, modern freighter named the Thorn Ascendant. There was a face circled in red ink again and again, a handsome, silver-haired man with a confident smile and the coldest eyes I had ever seen. Marcus Thorn. But the centerpiece of the room, sitting on the desk as if waiting for me, was a heavy, waterproof pelican case. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. This was the weapon Silas had talked about. My fingers trembled slightly as I unclipped the heavy latches and lifted the lid. There was no gold, no treasure. It was something far more valuable and infinitely more dangerous. Inside, nestled in protective foam, were meticulously organized ledgers detailing unofficial cargo manifests, a small, leather-bound journal, and at the bottom, a sealed, shock-proof caddy containing a set of hard drives. I opened the journal. The first page read, in a strong, clear hand, "My name is Captain Eva Rostova. If you are reading this, I have failed. But the truth must not die with me. Marcus Thorn is not just a smuggler. He is a monster. The evidence is in this case. My war is now yours." The storm outside raged on, but it was a whisper compared to the storm that had just broken inside me. I had come to this cliff seeking silence and escape from my own wars. Instead, I had just inherited someone else's. And as I looked at the hard drives, the Rosetta Stone of her secret war, I knew with a chilling certainty that the enemy was still out there and they had been guarding this secret for 15 years. Now they would be guarding me. The pelican case sat on the old wooden table like a Pandora's box, humming with the silent, terrible energy of its contents. The storm outside had begun to recede its fury, spent leaving behind a world washed clean and deceptively calm. But in the small lamplit circle of the cottage, a new and far more dangerous storm was gathering. With Atlas lying at my feet, a warm, reassuring weight, and Luna pacing restlessly by the door, a living barometer of my own anxiety, I delved into Captain Eva Rostova's war. The first thing I did was power up my satellite laptop, a rugged piece of gear that had seen me through worse places than a stormy coastline. I connected one of the hard drives from the case. My screen flickered to life, revealing a meticulously organized, encrypted archive. Eva was no amateur. She was a professional, leaving behind a trail of breadcrumbs that only someone with a certain mindset would understand. The password hint was a simple set of coordinates. Not a location, but a navigational waypoint. A ghost marker in the middle of a notoriously treacherous stretch of water known as the Devil's Jaw. It was a test. I punched in the name of the rock formation at the heart of the channel Widow's Tooth. Access granted. What unfolded on my screen was a tapestry of pure, calculated evil. Eva had documented a criminal enterprise of breathtaking scale. Marcus Thorn wasn't just smuggling contraband. The ledgers, cross-referenced with shipping manifests and satellite imagery, detailed a horrifying trade. He was using his fleet to transport not just illicit goods, but people. The photographs weren't just of crates. They were grainy, heartbreaking images of human cargo, a modern-day slave trade operating under the cover of legitimate commerce right here on American shores. But it was Eva's personal journal that painted the full, chilling picture. Her entries, written in a clear, concise script that betrayed the steady hand of a lifelong mariner, detailed her solitary investigation. She had noticed discrepancies in Thorne's shipping schedules, boats running dark in areas they had no business being. She had followed the money, uncovering a web of shell corporations and offshore accounts. She had documented payoffs to local officials, a network of corruption that reached into the very heart of the community that hailed Thorne as its savior. "He is a cancer," she wrote in one of the final entries. "He presents himself as the lifeblood of Port Blossom, but he is poisoning it from within, trading in human misery for profit. Sheriff Brody is on his payroll. I've seen the transfers. I am alone in this. I have compiled everything. If Thorne learns what I know, he will not hesitate. This cliff is my fortress, but I fear it is also becoming my tomb. Sheriff Brody." The name hit me like a physical blow. The portly, seemingly affable man I'd seen at the auction, the one who had averted his eyes. He wasn't just a bystander. He was a gatekeeper, a paid guardian of Thorne's secrets. The sun was just beginning to burn through the morning mist when I heard it, the distant, struggling grind of an engine making its way up my long, neglected driveway. Luna was instantly at the door, her fur bristling, a low growl starting in her throat. Atlas rose silently, planting himself between me and the entrance, a silent, immovable shield. I quickly disconnected the hard drive, stowed it back in its case, and slid the entire thing under a loose floorboard, kicking a rug over it just as a vehicle pulled to a stop outside. It was a county sheriff's SUV. And stepping out of it was Sheriff Brody himself, his large frame filling the doorway. "Morning," he said, his voice a folksy baritone that didn't quite match the cold, calculating look in his eyes. "Quite a blow we had last night. Just doing my rounds, checking on the folks out on the periphery. Make sure you weathered it all right." His excuse was so thin it was transparent. My property was a dead end, miles from any other residence. He wasn't in the area. He was on a mission. "Everything's fine, Sheriff," I said, my tone level, my body blocking his view of the interior. "Just a bit of wind and rain." His eyes weren't on me. They were sweeping the cottage, lingering for a fraction of a second on the hearth, where the slate stone was slightly askew, a thin line of fresh dust betraying its recent movement. His gaze then flicked to the cellar door, where the fresh splinters from Luna's claws were a raw, open wound on the old wood. He saw it all. "Good, good," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You know this place. It's got history. The old captain who lived here, Rostova, she was a bit of a recluse. Kept to herself. Stirred up trouble where there wasn't any. Some folks are better left to their own quiet corners, you know what I mean." It was a message wrapped in a folksy anecdote. "Don't dig. Don't be like Eva." "I appreciate the concern, Sheriff," I replied, my voice hard as iron. "But I've found that quiet corners are often where the most important things are hidden." The mask slipped. For a single fleeting moment, the friendly country sheriff was gone, replaced by a cold-eyed enforcer. A flicker of anger, of calculation, and then it was gone, hidden again behind a bland smile. "Well, you seem to have it all under control," he said, tipping his hat. "Just be careful. The sea around here can be treacherous. It has a way of claiming things that don't belong." He turned and walked back to his vehicle, leaving his final chilling threat hanging in the salt-laced air. I watched him drive away, my heart pounding a steady, rhythmic drumbeat of adrenaline. He hadn't come to check on me. He had come to assess me, to see if the new owner was a threat. And in my response, in the state of the cottage, he had found his answer. The war was no longer cold. I spent the next hour acting on pure instinct, a grim paranoia honed by years of survival. I checked the perimeter, and then I saw it. Tucked neatly into the tread of my Jeep's rear driver's side tire was a small, almost invisible puncture. It wasn't a nail or a piece of glass. It was a clean, deliberate slice from a razor-thin blade designed to create a slow, steady leak that would leave me stranded, isolated. It was a declaration. Brody's visit hadn't just been a probe. It had been a delivery. The first strike. They knew I was here. They suspected I had found something. And they had just cut my only line of escape. I stood there, the salty wind whipping around me, and understood the chilling reality of my situation. Eva Rostova's war was now mine, and the enemy had just put me under siege. The slashed tire was a punctuation mark at the end of Sheriff Brody's unspoken threat. It was a cold, deliberate period that said, "Your move is over. Ours is about to begin." I was no longer just a newcomer who had stumbled upon a local secret. I was an active threat, a variable in a 15-year-old equation they had thought long solved. Sitting and waiting for their next move wasn't a strategy. It was a death sentence. Eva Rostova had fought her war with evidence and secrecy. I had to fight mine, with the tools I knew best: foresight, preparation, and the disciplined paranoia of a soldier who knows the enemy is already inside the wire. The next day passed in a blur of tense, methodical work. I patched the tire, my hands moving with a familiar efficiency, but my mind was miles away, gaming out scenarios, running threat assessments. Every creak of the old cottage, every cry of a distant gull, was a potential footstep, a warning. Atlas remained a stoic shadow at my side, his quiet presence a grounding force, while Luna took up a sentinel post on the porch, her head constantly scanning the horizon where the gray sea met the gray sky. It was late afternoon when the second vehicle appeared. This one wasn't a struggling county SUV. It was a brand new black-on-black luxury pickup truck that devoured the rough terrain of my driveway with an arrogant ease. It purred to a stop, its tinted windows reflecting the grim facade of my cottage. The man who stepped out was tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored peacoat that seemed out of place in this rugged landscape. He had a mane of distinguished silver hair and the easy, confident smile of a man accustomed to owning every room and every coastline he stood on. I didn't need the photos from Eva's secret room to recognize him. It was Marcus Thorne. He moved with an air of absolute ownership, his expensive boots crunching on the gravel as he approached the porch where I stood. My arms crossed, my stance deliberately neutral. Luna let out a low, menacing growl, the fur on her back ridged like a saw blade. "That's quite a welcome," Thorne said, his voice smooth as sea-worn glass, though his eyes, the color of a winter ocean, were fixed on me with unnerving intensity. He ignored Luna completely. "She's a good judge of character," I replied, my voice flat. Thorne's smile didn't falter. "Jonas Keene, former Marine Force Recon. 2 tours. Honorable discharge. I do my homework." He gestured vaguely at the cottage, the cliffs, the sea. "I'll be direct, Mr. Keene. I appreciate a man who understands efficiency. This property, as you may have gathered, is of a sentimental value to my business interests. It's the last piece of a puzzle I've been assembling for a long time." "It's not for sale," I said, cutting him off. He chuckled, a low, patronizing sound. "Everything is for sale. It's simply a matter of finding the right price. I am prepared to offer you $250,000, cash. $250,000 for a piece of land you paid $500 for. A remarkable return on your investment. I think you'll agree. You can be on your way by nightfall, this whole unpleasantness forgotten." The offer was obscene. It was a confession. It confirmed everything. He wasn't trying to buy land. He was trying to buy a secret, to bury Eva's ghost once and for all. "The answer is no," I said, my voice quiet but unyielding. The pleasant mask finally slipped. The smile tightened, the warmth in his eyes freezing over, revealing the predator beneath. "Perhaps you don't understand," he said, his voice dropping, losing its smooth polish and gaining a hard, dangerous edge. "This isn't a negotiation. That land and anything that might be on it is part of a project that is far more important than one man's desire for solitude. I would hate for you to be an obstacle. Obstacles, Mr. Keene, have a tendency to get removed." He held my gaze for a long moment. The last person who lived here was stubborn too. She thought she could stand against the tide. The tide always wins. And some people mistake a tide for a tsunami, I countered. I'm not selling. Thorne's face hardened into a mask of cold fury. You will regret this, he hissed. He turned without another word, climbed back into his throne of a truck, and sped away, leaving a cloud of dust and the heavy silence of a declared war. His departure was the starting pistol. I knew I had a window, but it was closing fast. Thorne wasn't a man who made idle threats. He had just confirmed my position, and now he would move to eliminate me. I couldn't fight his network, not alone. I needed an ace in the hole. I needed a failsafe. That night, under the dim glow of a single lantern, I put my own plan into motion. I used my laptop to copy the most critical files from Eva's hard drives, the ledgers, the photos, and her final damning journal entry onto a small encrypted micro SD card. The originals went back into the Pelican case, which I returned to its hiding place, resealing the fireplace stone as best I could. The secret would remain here, but its echo had to escape. Before dawn, I was in my Jeep, the patched tire holding firm. I didn't head for the main highway. That would be the first place they'd look. Instead, I drove deeper into the coastal backwoods, taking a series of winding, forgotten logging roads, my eyes constantly scanning the rearview mirror. I was a ghost, doubling back, laying false trails, using every fieldcraft trick I knew to ensure I wasn't being followed. 2 hours later, I emerged near a small fishing town 50 miles down the coast, a place where no one knew my face. I found a secluded spot with a clear view of the sky, and pulled out the one piece of gear I had saved for an emergency like this, a compact military-grade satellite phone. There was only one number I needed to call. A man I had trusted with my life in the deserts of Afghanistan. A man who now wore the uniform of the U.S. Coast Guard Investigative Service, Captain David Ramirez. The call connected with a faint hiss. Ramirez. His voice was as sharp and no-nonsense as I remembered. Dave, it's Keen. There was a beat of stunned silence. Jonas, where the hell are you? This isn't your number. It's a burner, Dave. Listen to me, I don't have much time, I said, my voice low and urgent. I've stumbled into something big, something dark. It involves Thorne shipping. I gave him the 30-second summary. A missing captain, a massive human trafficking operation, and a conspiracy of silence. I could hear the faint sound of typing on his end. Thorne's been a person of interest for years, but we've never been able to make anything stick. It's a fortress. I have the key, I told him. I'm sending you a compressed encrypted data package right now. The password is the name of that village where we were pinned down back in '09. The one we don't talk about. I remember, he said, his voice grim. Got it. I see the file. Jonas, what kind of trouble are you in? The kind that ends with a man disappearing in a storm, I replied. Listen, this is the important part. Another storm front is moving in. It's going to hit my location by tonight, and it's going to be a bad one. I'm heading back there now. I have to protect the original evidence. I gave him the precise GPS coordinates of the cottage. Here's the contingency plan. My dead man's switch. If you do not receive a one-word check-in signal from this sat phone by 0500 tomorrow morning, 0500 Zulu time, you assume the worst. You take everything I sent you, you kick the door down on every federal agency you can trust, and you bring a storm of your own to these coordinates. Tell them to come heavy. Do you understand? The line was silent for a moment, the weight of the instructions hanging in the air. Understood, Jonas, he finally said, his voice the firm, unwavering tone of a soldier and a friend. 0500. If I don't hear from you, I raise hell. That's all I need, I said. Watch your six, Dave. You watch yours, he replied, and I ended the call. I powered down the phone and drove back towards the cliff, towards the brewing storm and the inevitable confrontation. A strange sense of calm settled over me. I had set the pieces in motion. I had armed the trap. Now all I had to do was survive the night and be the bait. The storm Thorn had promised arrived, not as a tide but as a monster. It was the storm from my first night magnified 100-fold. A fury unleashed from the black heart of the Atlantic. The wind didn't just howl. It screamed 1,000 tortured souls clawing at the walls of the cottage. Rain came down, not in sheets, but in solid driving walls of water that blurred the world into a churning gray chaos. My satellite phone was useless, the signal obliterated. The single road to the cottage would be a river of mud. I was utterly, completely isolated. This was the battlefield Thorn had chosen. Darkness fell an absolute and suffocating blanket. I killed the lantern, plunging the cottage into a darkness broken only by the frantic strobe-like flashes of lightning. I sat in a hard-back chair, my rifle resting across my lap. Its cold steel, a familiar comfort. Atlas lay at my feet, his body a tense living wire of anticipation. Luna was a restless ghost, pacing from the single window to the barricaded door, a low whine caught in her throat. They knew. An animal knows when the predator is circling. The attack came just after midnight. It began not with a bang, but with a whisper. Luna froze mid-pace, her head cocked, her ears swiveling towards the cliff-face side of the cottage. A second later, Atlas rose silently, the growl in his chest, a deep seismic rumble. I heard nothing but the storm, but I trusted them. I moved to the window, peering through a small crack in the boards I'd nailed across it. A flash of lightning illuminated the scene, and my blood ran cold. Two figures clad in black tactical gear were moving up the cliff path using ropes and climbing gear with a terrifying professionalism. A third was already on the ledge below the porch. They weren't thugs. They were professionals. A moment later, a high-performance boat, running without lights, appeared in the churning water below, a silhouette against the white foam. On its deck, a figure stood watching. Thorn. The lights in the cottage flickered and died. They'd cut the generator line. All right, I whispered into the darkness, my hand on Atlas's neck. Let's go to work. The fight was a brutal, intimate dance in the dark. They came at the windows first, trying to pry the boards loose. I didn't fire. Ammunition was a resource not to be wasted. Instead, I used the house itself. A heavy bookshelf sent crashing to the floor near the west window made them scatter, thinking I was over there. It bought me the time to take up a position by the east. A dark shape appeared at the broken pane. Muzzle flash. The rifle bucked against my shoulder. The shape disappeared with a choked cry. One down. They changed tactics, trying to breach the main door. I let them. I let them slam their weight against it. Let the old wood groan and splinter. Luna, go, I commanded. A gray and white blur shot across the room. She didn't bark. She slammed her body against the far wall near the hearth, then let out a volley of furious, aggressive barks, drawing their attention, making them think I had an accomplice in that corner. While their focus was on the phantom threat, I took a flanking position. The door burst inward. A figure stumbled through, weapon raised, blinded by the darkness. He was expecting a fight from the hearth. He never saw me coming from the side. The battle raged for what felt like an eternity. It was a chaotic ballet of muzzle flashes, splintering wood, and the savage growls of my dogs. Luna was a phantom. Her speed, a weapon darting through the darkness to nip and harass, drawing fire, creating openings. Atlas was my rock, my Praetorian guard. When a third man managed to slither through a shattered window, Atlas met him. It wasn't a frenzy of barking and snapping. It was a single, calculated act of violence. He launched himself forward, bypassed the man's flailing arms, and clamped his powerful jaws on the arm holding the pistol. There was a sickening crunch, and a scream of agony that was swallowed by the storm. The gun clattered to the floor. 2 down. We were holding them. We were winning. And that's when I heard the new sound over the wind, the sharp metallic crack of a flare gun being fired from the boat. Burn it! The voice was Thorn's, a distant, furious roar carried on the wind. If we can't have it, no one will. Burn it all down. A second later, a brilliant red star sailed through the air and smashed through the main window. The flare landed on a pile of Eva's old charts and books, the old dry paper and wood, seasoned by a century of sea salt and sun, caught fire with a terrifying whoosh. The world erupted in a vortex of orange flame and thick black smoke. The fortress had become a funeral pyre. The heat was unbearable, the smoke a choking poison. The choice was gone. Staying inside meant a fiery death. To me, I yelled, my voice hoarse. Atlas released the man's arm and was at my side in an instant. Luna close behind. There was no more cover, no more strategy. There was only the inferno behind us, and the guns of our enemies in front. With a final desperate roar, I kicked the remains of the front door off its hinges and plunged out into the screaming storm, into the deep night, and into the face of whatever waited for us in the fire and the rain. We burst from the cottage, not into a refuge, but onto the final killing ground. The world was a dizzying nightmare of fire and water. Behind us, the inferno roared, a hungry beast, devouring the log walls, sending a pillar of black smoke and angry orange sparks into the storm-lashed sky. In front of us, silhouetted against the flames, stood the last of Thorn's men, his weapon raised. Beyond him, on the deck of the boat that bucked in the violent waves, was Marcus Thorn himself, a king watching his kingdom of secrets burn. This was it, the end of the line. We were trapped between the fire and the sea, caught in a crossfire. My rifle was nearly empty, my body screaming from a dozen cuts and bruises. Atlas and Luna flanked me, their fur matted with rain and soot, their teeth bared in a final defiant stand. They were not afraid. They were ready. Thorn raised a hand, a signal to his man on the cliff. The end was a single heartbeat away. It was then that a new sound cut through the chaos. It wasn't the roar of the fire or the scream of the wind. It was a deeper, rhythmic, percussive thump, thump, thump that grew louder with every passing second. A sound that vibrated not just in the air, but deep in my chest. A sound I knew better than my own name. Heads turned. Eyes looked up. Cutting through the maelstrom of rain and smoke, two new shapes emerged from the blackness. They weren't gulls. They were gods from the machine. The lead aircraft was a sleek, black MH-60 Jayhawk, its Coast Guard insignia barely visible in the strobing lightning. Behind it, larger and more menacing, was a Black Hawk, its profile unmistakable, its presence an omen of federal wrath. A voice amplified and impossibly loud boomed from above, a sound that seemed to come from the heavens themselves. U.S. Coast Guard. This is the CGIS Thorn. Your vessel is under federal seizure. Power down your engines. All personnel on the cliff, drop your weapons and get on the ground. Now, my dead man's switch. It was 0500 Zulu. My friend had kept his word. Dave had brought the storm. The effect was instantaneous. Thorn's last man on the cliff, a professional motivated by money, not loyalty, understood the new math immediately. His rifle clattered to the wet rock as his hands shot into the air. On the boat, Thorn froze. His face, illuminated by the searchlight from the Jayhawk, was a canvas of disbelief that quickly curdled into the cold, stark horror of a man whose world had just ended. His empire, built on shadows and fear, had just been vaporized by a beam of light from the sky. For a moment, he looked like a statue of defiance against the backdrop of my burning home. Then, with a final guttural cry of pure rage that was lost to the wind, he was tackled by a swarm of figures in tactical gear, repelling from the helicopter. The next hour was a whirlwind of controlled professional chaos. Coast Guard agents secured the cliff and the boat, while a federal tactical team swept the area. The two men I had disabled inside the cottage were found, given medical attention, and placed in cuffs. The conspiracy, held together for 15 years by power and murder, had unraveled in a matter of minutes. As the first hint of a gray, storm-battered dawn broke over the horizon, a man in a Coast Guard jacket approached me. It was Dave Ramirez. He looked older, more tired, but his eyes held the same sharp fire. "You cut it a little close, Jonas," he said, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "That was the deadline," I replied, the exhaustion finally hitting me, making my legs feel weak. "Thorn is singing like a canary," Dave said, gesturing towards the boat. "But he keeps gloating. Says whatever evidence Rostova had is gone. Turned to ash." I looked at the smoldering, blackened ruins of my short-lived home. A slow, grim smile touched my lips. He was always a step behind her. I pointed to the one thing left standing, a defiant monument against the dawn sky, the massive stone chimney. The fire never touched the foundation, the real evidence, the original hard drives. They're safe. They're buried in stone right where she left them. My war was over. Eva Rostova's war was won. I came to this cliff, seeking silence, a place to bury the ghosts of my past. Instead of quiet, I found the echo of a war fought by a woman I'd never met. With Atlas and Luna by my side, we didn't just survive the storm Thorn unleashed upon us. We finished Captain Rostova's fight and dragged a dark truth into the light. Our small pack faced down a corrupt empire, and against all odds we won. This entire journey was a testament to the kind of loyalty that asks for nothing in return. If you believe in the unbreakable bond between a human and their pack, show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing for more adventures. We want to hear from you in the comments. Which moment of courage from Atlas or Luna stood out the most? The fight for this cliff is over. But as I begin to rebuild from the ashes, I'm discovering that Thorn's network has roots that run deeper than Eva ever knew. And buried deep within her encrypted files is a single cryptic entry about a place further up the coast. A place she only referred to as the ship's graveyard. The truth we found here might only be the beginning.